Very good. Right. So make yourself comfortable, and just at the onset of the chillier weather, I think it's always a good idea to take a little bit more time, be a little bit more aware of how far you can move and so on and so forth as our bodies adjust to the colder weather. And remember, cold will make you kind of pull in, but the stances that we take, the postures that we use in Tai Chi, look to sort of create space for movement. So an awareness of your posture is probably even more important, just to avoid those little kind of like blocks and areas of tightness that could potentially end up with you pulling a muscle or something like that. And also realize your circulation is bound to be a little bit sluggish. So think about this: forwards in your chair, weight a little bit forwards, feeling the support from your feet and your hips, and from the chair and the floor. Feeling the support from within your body, this area of the skeleton, and that slightly more dense quality, however you imagine this sense of the stronger area of the body deep within that supports you, and that you gradually learn to move from. Really just reminding yourself, I just notice I'm sitting here, my shoulders are up, and that's because I've just not long come in from a class that I did, and I was on my bike, and I'm just like that. So just taking a bit more time. Oh yeah, there's a framework there. We can begin to settle in, release some of that tightness, some of that stiffness. Rubbing your hands together. Tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder and your arm. On the other side. Upper part of the chest. And your head. And then the legs. And feet out, reclining back in your chair. Doing your weight drop in. And again, noting, maybe it's a bit more difficult to get that feeling of releasing, opening up within your body. We often hear during the colder weather people with, say, respiratory problems can struggle a bit. That would apply to all of us, whether you've got a condition or not. It comes from that kind of sense of the body constricting inwards. So our practice really does have to reflect the environment that we're in. I mean, I find I go out in the mornings and practice. Well, obviously it's colder, so what I practice and how long I practice for, and so on and so forth, will change, and also my expectations of the practice. Not quite icy yet, but there are sometimes when you can only spend a limited amount of time before your fingers going numb and things like that. So just get a sense for where you are right now. Remember, this isn't always a case of I've got to work on this, I need to get better at that, and so on and so forth. Sometimes it's just I'm just going to sort of sit back. I'm not going to concern myself too much with that little bit of improvement. Maybe today's the day to just kind of flow with the movement a little bit. So, chance to get a sense for what's appropriate, what you need. coming back to the upright position. Again, if you can be forwards, then that's good. But you know, as I often say, if you find that your back starts to ache or something like that, you just sit back, give it a rest, and just letting the shoulders drop very carefully and gently, turning your head. These little movements go a long way towards preparing us for the day, and obviously preparing for the exercises. But the tapping exercise that we did a few moments ago and the joint rotations actually are a good practice at the start of the day. Hands in front of the shoulders. The other thing about these is they're very simple, and we do them every class, and so they become a kind of barometer. You might be doing this and thinking, "Oh, last week I could move further," or maybe the other way around, or something like that. So they give us a chance to very gently begin to kind of assess what's going on for us at the moment. Going forwards. And down to your sides. Noting those places where you feel some kind of response to the patterning. You turn your hand, maybe feel the openness across your chest. On. Just trying to keep your attention on where another in your body, in your movements, or centered in your body and your movements. And then winding around. Just register as well that again, you know, in the colder weather, we spend more energy trying to keep warm. I mean, you know, you could feel a little bit tired, and you know, it's now noticeable, isn't it? It's getting darker early in the evenings and so on and so forth. It's a natural response to feel tired now. Back the other way. Rest your hand. And then ease forwards and push back. Very careful with your lower back. It seems the lower back is very susceptible to the cold. In the muscles of your back and in the spine, the soft tissue in that area, including the kidneys themselves, just beginning to get a kind of sense of movement into them. And then turn a little. And then turn in the other direction, to turn in the center of your body, not just twisting your shoulders around. And again, just be prepared to note that your range of movement may be slightly less than when it was warmer, at least to begin with. And then going around. and back the other way. To the center and step it out, heel toe. With that, just a heel toe, and then just that little bit of pressure downwards. So that rather than just dropping the foot, there's a definite sort of sense of stepping, like you might step if you were walking on soft sand or a slightly uncertain path in one way or another. Just learning to pay a little bit more attention to the process of stepping. And on the other side. And then feet back down. I like the passage in a very old medical text called the Yellow Emperor's Book of Chinese Medicine. It's probably the root text of all Chinese medicine. It's over 2,000 years old. It's quite extensive, but there's a bit at the beginning where it's talking about how we should live for a healthy life, and it says, well, in the spring, the energy is rising and there's work to do on the land, because obviously it was an agricultural culture, and you get up early and stays light quite late, so you stay up till it's quite late and so on and so forth. And in the summer again, there's all that going on, and you stay up late and you get up early and you work hard. And in the autumn, you start to just ease off a little bit. And then by the time you get to the winter, long nights and so on and so forth, you get up late, you go to bed quite early, you don't do much in between. I'm paraphrasing really, but basically, it's basically pointing us at this idea that we should be prepared to adjust how we live in accordance with the seasons and the weather and so on and so forth. Some of it we do all too little, I think, in many ways in our culture. So you think that we're insulated against these things, but we're not really. So again, that will affect our practice. So starting with your weight back in your hips, hands turn forwards and bird folds its way. Again, just every now and then reminding yourself to take note of small changes and movements within your body other than just your arms. Recognize that it's very easy to sort of drift off, particularly with the very familiar movements. So, yes, it's this one, so you can kind of do it on automatic while you're planning what you're going to do next weekend and things like that. It's quite interesting sometimes when you bring your attention back, it comes back with a certain sort of, a certain freshness. I hadn't noticed that in the movement or something like that. So always looking to feel more of what's going on. And the key thing there really is the focus of your attention in the exercise, which begins to give you a sense of stillness. It's from that point of stillness that we begin to be able to observe more. Fisherman cast the net. Notice as your weight moves, you settle into either your feet or into your hips. Very act of that settling is the start of the process that leads to the push up. If you were doing this on a very springy chair, you would feel that. You would sink back and you would feel the springs pushing up underneath you. And the idea would be to just let them push you forward. Same thing with the legs. These are the punctuation points. Ideally, we would keep the focus of our attention through the whole movement, but quite often it drifts away. So there's also the point where maybe we just once again touch base. And that push up helps to just send your arms out. So a lot of the movement in your arms comes from the connection to your hips and your weight going forwards. But as your weight settles in your feet, so there's that push back up, that maybe pushes your arms out just a little bit more. Same thing in your hips as you go back, although as always, I always feel it's less obvious with the movements settling back into our hips. Our arms don't really want to go behind our shoulders very far. And then rolling the ball in, imaginary ball there, just drawing your hands over, trying to avoid the idea of lifting your arms. It's a pull on your arms. And just be aware of this angle between your side and your arm. When you get to this point, that angle remains the same for a while at least. So the initial energy comes from that movement up from your legs. And then again, maybe just a little bit extra as you get used to that, but nothing forced, nothing strained. Expanding in belly and chest as you come back up. And then turning your hands in, opening your chest. Vision spreads its way. Feeling the movement in chest and upper back. Just a gently massaging quality. One more time. Again, the changeover, fairly simple. Hands staying down, just above your legs, elbows going out a bit, so chest and upper back still engaged, but pushing wave. Try not to overextend your arms. So the main movement, your weight goes forwards, that brings your shoulder forwards. The shoulder pushes your elbow forwards, and your arm swings up because of the shape of the arm, but you don't want to be out there somewhere. There. So as a general kind of principle, and there are variations in this, but it's not a bad, if you pardon the pun, rule of thumb. When we extend out, our hands end up in line with our feet. Not quite rigid, it may go a little bit further sometimes. But that's the sort of diffuse boundary, shall we say. It's not chipped in stone or anything. But it means that there's a direct relationship between our stance, where our feet are, where our hips are, and the range of movement that we get. And then your hands fisted. Remember, it's a loose fist. So you should be able to get a finger down comfortably through the middle of your fist, not held tight. But you may find yourself sort of gripping tightly and just loosen your fingers if that's the case. Open your hands, spreading your fingers out a little bit now, winding back. Well, wind back, turning your hands palm down, polishing the table. As you extend out here and you push your arms out, just be aware again of what's happening in your back and any potential sort of stiffness there. And again, let that help you to measure how far you should be moving. So, for instance, I can get to here and I'm fine. If I go to then, now I can feel the strain setting in. It's something I want to avoid. I'm looking for that free flow of movement of energy through my body. That's one of the key areas of cultivation, I think, in these arts. One more to each side. Coming back. Your hands rest down but palm up and pressing down through feet and hips, going very gently, feeling that lengthening and contraction. I'm exaggerating now, but if you watch my head, see how my head is coming up and then sinking down. As I say, that is an exaggeration, but very carefully try that a couple of times. Push your hips down. It's almost like somebody's pressing down on your head and you're pushing back up. Just feel how your spine and your back extend and contract. And then hands in front of you, cradling the ball. So we begin to associate any kind of expanding movement upwards or sideways or whatever plane with a reinforced sense of connecting to the ground, the hips, the feet. And then turn your hands out, the wild goose. And then parting the clouds, easing forward so you can just let your hands pass in front of your knees, sit back and push up. So probably slightly more complex than the standing equivalent. Make sure you come back into your hips, get that sense of, again, sinking in your hips and then pushing up. This is all very exaggerated, by the way. And because of that, my posture is going out of line. But again, I'll show you there, sinking down in the hips, pushing up. Again, just trying to keep a focus of your attention on these small changes and movements within your body, and how they build into the bigger movements. Now change into dragon plucks the stars from the sky. So if you were, for instance, looking to be able to do this without your shoulder tightening, then sort of looking at what's going on, looking at how you're generating the movement, where the effort's going into, is a useful practice and a good application for that trained attention. Do one more after this. Both hands in and alternating between the push up just a little above your head and the sideways push. And staying a little bit in front, just by a few millimeters. So here from the side, see where my hand is, it's there, it's not there, but it's not out there either, just slightly above the head. I could almost stroke down my own face. My fingers are potentially that close. And then when I push out, my hand gets to there, and if I turn to the side, it'd be my little or my ring finger roughly in line with my ear. Not that, because that's now pulling on the shoulder, tightening the chest. So this keeps a sense of space in the joints of the body, in particular. And we continue to allow the movement to flow through. And then extend one foot knees still bent, scooping the sea, looking at the sky. Again, please be very careful with your back. And there's two things to consider. One is how far you're moving. Three things actually. The other is the direction of the movement. You should put you directly into this leg, not out there somewhere. Maybe not that far. The third thing is how do you come up? And it's your hips dropping back, pulling on your back and your shoulders, and finally your head and neck that do that. And then grasping the tiger's ear. Again, you're angled, but your hips dropping back, bringing you to a more upright position. So I think is one of the really key elements in the Tai Chi posture. And very, very important again, you know, as we move into winter, we tend to sort of punch over and drop down with good reason. It's cold and dark and so on and so forth. But again, we want to contrast that. We don't want to lose that openness in our posture inside, but we don't want to have to strain to be upright. So this mechanism by which we allow gravity to pull our hips back and down, we're aware of the connections between hips and the back of the pelvis up to our shoulders, mostly through the back, but it doesn't mean the front isn't engaged. And we just gradually learned that we don't have to strain to be upright. And hands twisted and grasping the tiger neck. One more time. So, heart in the wild horse's mane. Back into your right hip. Just a few rounds, fixed step. You're going to go from right hip to left leg. You go diagonally. Feels as though you're pushing a little bit with your shoulder, and then you turn, feeding the left hand out. Got the front hand, the right hand down in front of your hip. Come back slowly, holding the ball, and move across. Do the same thing from your left hip into your right foot. And next time we're going to start to move the foot. So you go back into your right hip. You take a short step forward with your left foot. Heel goes down, toe. You push into the ground a little bit, and you go forwards. You won't get such a wide movement here. Come back, raise your toes. Replace the foot where its original position. Move your weight across. Again, you know, think of that alignment between arm and leg, hand and foot. This really does help to produce this whole body awareness, and partly by emphasizing the significance of your feet. The last time And then just letting your hand. A couple of slow, gentle breaths. Once again, rubbing your hands together. Tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder and your arm. And the other side. Part of your chest. Your belly. And your legs. Resting your hands and pushing your heels up. We're doing these to prepare to stand. And there's a thing called postural hypotension, which is basically those times when, I'm sure we've all experienced it at some point or another, you're sitting down, maybe watching television or something like that, the phone rings, and you leap up to answer it, and then you're suddenly, you get a bit sort of lightheaded, taking your knees around in a circle. And that's just because your body takes a little bit of time to adjust to the change in posture, but your body also has to keep a constant blood supply, particularly to your brain. So when you go from sitting or laying down to standing up, suddenly your heart's got to beat a bit faster, go back the other way, and everything that's involved in circulation it's got to work a bit more, and there can sometimes be a delay in that. And again, particularly in the colder weather, when maybe your circulation becomes a bit more sluggish. Okay, so just remind yourself of the qualities of this posture when we feel supported. And then you're ready, standing. So again, the little tapping exercise that we've been done, it can be done in bed. Quite easily. Both the actual effect of the tapping and the effort that you're making to deliver the tapping are actually things that will help to just raise your heartbeat a little bit, get the blood flowing a little bit more. These are useful tools for all of us. Now, feet parallel, weight forwards, hips dropping back, sinking down, bring your hands around. Do these first three exercises a little sequence of 3. And using the sort of juxtaposition of these exercises just to once again draw your attention into very subtle changes. Look with, where do you feel the expansion and the contraction? Where does it come from? So that second question is easy to answer. It comes from the push up from the legs. But if you just focus on your belly and lower back in the first one, sinking down again as you go into the wild goose, good expansion here, belly and lower back, and up towards solar plexus and lower part of the rib cage, and then belly, solar plexus, and up top part of your chest, and of course into your arms. And really, this is the pattern, the general pattern we want to feel with all of the movements. One more round after this one. Good. And just shake out a little bit. So again, we have this very fundamental mechanism in Tai Chi where we're yielding to the pull of gravity. And as a result, we maybe feel a response in our legs, our lower back, our hips. This is both seated and standing, which ends up with being pushed up. It's like when you bounce a ball. If you're going to bounce a ball, you have to let it drop down first, and then it will and then it will come up. So this I think is one of the key sort of energetic cycles of movement that we work with in Tai Chi. We're constantly trying to yield to the pull of gravity, and unless we've actually collapsed, which hopefully we haven't, then there's a response from the rest of the body. I think it was Newton who said that for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction, and it's as simple as that. So take a foot forwards, go into the bow stance, and actually we could do the same thing here. We could sink down and push up, and sink down and push up. If we move the weight back, so more of our weight's in our back leg, we very carefully, mind your knee, we do the same thing there. But we don't go up and down in this posture. What we do is we go forward. So as we feel that push up, or that push about to push us up, our intent is for it to move us forwards. We sink through the front leg, and our intent is to move us back. So to begin with, we're totally focused on our legs and that mechanism, but realize that actually, there is still going to be an upward energy. So you may feel changes in your upper body, especially if you add this image of moving through water. And of course, when we come to move our arms, then that's where the energy comes from. So it's one of the principal sources of movement, where the movement comes from. And of course, the sinking down very much helps with this sense of connecting to the ground, the root. So the root isn't just about creating a foundation, keeping us stable, important though that is, but it's also, in a sense, the place where much of the energy comes from. Or the initial energy, I should say. Coming back, raising your toes and your heel. There's all sorts of energetic reactions in your body. Breathing, of course, is concerned with that, the food that you eat, or the kind of biochemical, whatever. Energy is the capacity to do work. So whatever's happening within your body is some kind of energetic reaction, energetic process associated with it. And really, one of the things I think long-term in Tai Chi, what begins to happen is that those separate processes begin to harmonize. Well, they're not totally separate anyway, but. And then stepping in. Good, and then on the other side. So in terms of actual the big movement, that's sinking down and pushing up, because you've got the ground beneath your feet and the ground is solid, something to push against, then it would definitely contribute a great deal to the actual physical movements. But again, feel what's happening in back and belly and chest and so on and so forth. Raising your toes and your heel. Stepping in. And step through. And change direction. So we're going to do fisherman cast the net and then wind blows the willows. But what I'm going to ask you to do is say, you know, when we do fisherman cast the net, we arrive in this leg. Remember, we sink down, we start to experience the rise in energy, the push back up, and that's going to move us back. But at the same time, some of it actually assists the arms in the movement. And the same thing when we go back, we settle down, and I start to feel the push up, and it just helps to push my arms out a little bit more. So then when we change to wind blows the willows, we get to here, we're sinking down, the arms are already rising. And then you could recall the feeling of movement up through into the solar plexus that we get with the wild goose. So actually, you know, we managed to avoid getting here and then thinking, oh, I'm going to move my arms out, everything tightening up. To see how you get on with that change, the principal agent of change, if we've got everything else in place already, is simply going to be the turn in the center of the body. So you go forwards, you settle into the front foot, feel the rise in energy, let it push you back, but also a certain amount coming up through belly and chest and so on and so forth. So there's a movement, a momentum that moves your arms from your back leg, but also this rise in energy from the front leg makes a contribution. It's not one thing, but I'm just going to need to focus on that one thing for the moment. So when we did rooting down and we did that little sequence, I drew your attention to the belly, the expansion in your belly, just maybe feeling that a little bit again. I mean, you can do the same thing going back as well. I'm just focusing more on the, I think it's probably easier to feel on the front. Then you go forwards and then you turn. And then again, you know, think of that rise in energy to the solar plexus in the wild goose. You go back and turn. So what you're doing here is three quite difficult things. You're extending and lifting your arms. You're turning in the center of your body. You're transferring your weight. All three things are processes that are sort of looked at in things like falls rehabilitation therapy, because they're all movements that could throw us offline, affect our stability, cause the body to tense up. And yet with wind blows the willows, we learn to do them in a very smooth, fluid way, maintaining our stability, not straining in the body. So it gives you an idea perhaps of the real difficulty of the exercise, but also the benefit of the exercise. If those actions, extending your arms and so on and so forth, are things that, well, I'm sure we've all done it. You've reached out to get something and kind of tweaked a muscle or something like that. We don't have to do that. If we practice in this way, our body learns alternative ways of making the movement. Good. Okay. Shake out. On the other side. Obviously, this is quite a long-term prospect. Fisherman cast a net, and it requires practice and the awareness of movement within the body that I've been pointing you at, and an ability to just quieten your attention, which is also connected with sinking down and so on and so forth, as we know, because it's much easier to notice these details when your mind isn't rushing and busy. And perhaps a focus as well, because we begin to focus our intent more clearly, greater precision. And so, of course, that requires conscious effort to begin with. But if we make it enough, then it becomes much more natural. So we've got almost all of what we need for Wind Blows the Willows. You go forwards and you simply turn. Resisting the temptation to lift your arms for effect, even if it means that they don't seem to be going as far as you might expect them to. And then going into dragonfly skims the water. So you go into whichever direction you're moving in, bring your foot in, maybe just raising the foot. And again, bear in mind, you're transferring your weight, you're turning, you're extending your arms. These are all potentially tricky movements that may cause us to lose stability or to strain. And yet, they don't have to do that. And then going back. One more time. And then go back to your chairs. So all of that from the same starting point. So that makes the starting point really important. And we do want to realize that these things are accumulative. This is one of the hard things to get across to beginners, that actually what happens in the first 2 or 3 minutes of the class is significant for what happens in sort of like the 20th minute and the 30th minute and things like that. And it's often the first 5 or 10 minutes that are the most crucial, because it's there that everything is laid out. And the rest is putting it together into certain shapes. But again, it's very easy to drift off. So the same exercise can feel very different to us, which is one of the great things about it, I think, because people are able to practice what is essentially the same exercise, but quite often in very different ways. If you're in a group with somebody who's completely new, and we did say the wild goose, your perspective on it is going to be very different, and the feel of it is probably going to be quite different at that stage. So it's part of the ongoing progression, I think, in these exercises. People sometimes say, when are we going to do the advanced stuff? My first response is always, you've already done it. Yeah, it's not just a question of more complex exercises, although there is some of that involved, but also a question of how you're doing the commonplace. You know, can you bring that measure of attention, say, to the simple rotation of your arms or your shoulders? So coming back to this basic posture is step one, and you can't take the rest of the steps unless you've taken step one. So embrace tiger, return to man. It's sometimes said that everything you need to know about Tai Chi is there in your first class. It just takes you 30 years to realize it. Since I'm now in my 40th year of practice, I reckon it's going to take me at least 50 years. Maybe more. I hope it never actually gets to a point where I think to myself, well, I know all about this now. And then rest. Lovely. And just open your eyes. That was great. Thank you very much, everybody, again, as always.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
Yes, you too. Thank you very much.